So good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Lynn Rule. I am with the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, and I'm very happy to be hosting our Youth Advisory Board. And we have a panel this morning with some young adults who are going to share some of their thoughts and feelings about going back to school and going back into our live and somewhat hybrid sessions and what that has been like. So before we start, I just want to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Michael, do you want to start?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Scanlon. I am a youth coordinator at Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Emily?
My name is Emily Ball, and I am the mentor coordinator for CPAC. Thanks for being here today.
Jake?
Hello, my name is Nick Shumba. I have been a member of the Connecticut Youth Advisory Board for about 5 years now.
We're happy to have you. And Allie?
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Allie Carnan and I am also a youth coordinator at CPAC.
Great. So thank you again for joining us. So let's think back to 2019. So before COVID hit, the fall of 2019, when we were going back to school, people were kind of summing up the end of their summer. What do you feel were some of the biggest issues that were facing young adults at that time? Jake, let's start with you. What did you perceive at that point to be the biggest issues?
When I think back to the fall of 2019, it was a really different world than it is today. I think some of the biggest issues were just being nervous about starting a new school year and maybe at a new school.
Were you going to a new school then?
I wasn't, but it is something that my peers were doing though. Yeah.
Very good. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add to Jake's comments? Emily?
Yeah. I personally was not a student in 2019, but I do have to imagine that changing schools and going from virtual to not virtual and vice versa, and reacclimating to a school environment when you've been in a virtual world for so long must be very challenging for students in this day and age.
Very much so. What other things do you think were impacting young adults back in 2019 besides just school? Do you recall anything else that long time ago, 2 years ago? Maybe from a social perspective?
Yeah, Lynn, if I can jump in, I think and definitely socially you're on the mark, because I think, it's the tale as old as time, so to speak, about like fitting in. I mean, I certainly can relate to that. So, I mean, I think that's always been a struggle. And I think, I think the virtual world has, like, even for me, like I stepped kind of back from like some personal social media, but relating it to that, I think there can be this either a fear of missing out, like, oh, if you're not like always actively like up in everything, and then like almost just being too much into, with that, there can be this pressure to either like perform or to just put everything out there or just yeah, just really fitting in. And I think, it's unfortunately, it's not something that's new or going away. I hope that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense. So how do you think that when we think about those things that impacted us back in 2019, how has that changed now in 2021? Emily, you touched a bit on that in terms of going between hybrid and virtual, or virtual and in person.
Well, I think that has really changed because a lot of students and even just people in general were used to operating in a world where people saw each other every day and communicated in ways that, were normal, but now virtual is normal, and going back in person is going to be, I guess you could say, the opposite, because we've become accustomed to virtual. So especially if you're a child going back into like from school, and if you've been on virtual, you really don't know what regular school in a building is supposed to be like.
Very much so. Very much so. Jake, now you are online, correct?
I am, yes, and have been for a while now. Yeah.
And you're looking forward to being able to go in person.
I am very much so, not only because it is a better way for me to learn, but also the social aspect of it too. Being able to see, yes, my friends, but also the people I may not know well.
Right. It's easier to meet people when you can see them face to face than just on a screen, right?
Exactly, yes.
So as if you're online, do you feel, and I'm sorry, I'm going to throw this extra question out there to you, Jake, but do you find it hard to just maybe in the chat say hi to someone that you don't know?
Well, in the beginning I did, but I think that as you message people a bit more consistently, you begin to get a feel for who they are.
So it makes it a little easier. You don't feel as self-conscious about saying hi
Right,
to a
yeah,
stranger online, right?
exactly.
Michael, did you want to add something to that? I see you've unmuted, so I wondered if you were going to add to that.
Oh, no, I agree with Jake. I think, again, like thinking about like the virtual world, I think I'll repeat this a lot, but to me, it's what you make of it. And I'm not discounting anyone's real experiences or opinions. But I think, I'm a huge proponent of choice. So I think as much as there can be in a lot of ways. So I find it easy to, chat people up online, and of course a whole separate conversation on internet safety and all of that, but there I think it's a great way to stay connected. And like, I'm a huge video gamer. There's platforms you can like play games together, chat up in games. So I mean, the array of ways to stay in touch and get connected is beyond what some people could think is out there.
So Michael, this leads us into our next question, which was how we feel that virtual meetings or classes or meetings can be successful for young adults and for teens. So what pointers do you have? I know you preferred that online approach. So what do you see as being a way to be successful in that? venue?
Yeah, so I'll try to hit at this from a couple different angles. So I think first of all, virtual meetings, classes, etc., it takes into account our own schedule. So like for example, I'm like a late bloomer. I tried college right out of high school. I didn't do so great. So I'm like, all right, let me pursue working in the real world, making my way. And then, there is always that point of like, oh, I should consider going back, but my work schedule was like whatever it was at the time, right? But like the point being, the classes, you go to register and look, hey, let me dip my toe back in, and like the classes, like I would have to like either leave work or try to get them to be flexible. And a lot of cases, many jobs young adults have, they're not going to be like, oh sure, Michael, go ahead and like mess up an entire schedule. So because a lot of like the jobs I've, it's not practical. Or I've recently learned for like my own personal energy level, I used to think I was a night owl, and I am in a lot of ways, but in terms of like doing my best for schoolwork, I'm better in like morning to late morning. I start to like fade. So again, based on my work hours, I couldn't do that. Now I'm stuck slogging through classes that I'm like, trying to be successful at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night. Whereas like, with virtual things, you may still have to take a time you may not like, but it's way easier to just do your job, come home and log in at home versus now drive, 30 minutes or whatever to your next class, etc. And I think the other point I want to make is like with my own anxiety too. I've come a long way in my own journey with that, but I think especially when I was starting out, my anxiety was, really severe, and that impacted how well I could learn. And I think that the accommodations, I wasn't aware of all the accommodations. And so having, if I had had options of more things virtual, I think, again, I'm a huge advocate of having choice and flexibility, and it hurts no one. So just for me, I'm a huge proponent of that. And it really does support and meet people where they're at. Because if you had to do a hybrid model, you can have people there live, you can have some people zooming in, whatever. So that's kind of my take on that one.
So Allie, you made a decision, a personal decision to hold off on going back to class for right now, right? Would you like to share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So when the pandemic had first kind of started, I had been planning to go to school in the fall, because it kind of really shut down, early spring, so late winter. So my plan was to go in the fall, and I ended up backing out because even though sometimes online classes help me, but it has to be a subject that I know very well and can kind of do in my sleep. Like I have done online courses before. It was the pandemic, and psychology online course I did incredible because that's my major, that's my passion. I knew a lot of this stuff, so it came easy to me. However, I did notice that even during that point, online classes were typically more difficult because there would be much more work, which I didn't expect. So at the same time, I was like, okay, this is easy for me, but it's so much more work. So it's more time consuming. Whereas if I did it in person, a lot of the work wouldn't have needed to be done. But then I did math online, which was my worst subject, and I had to take it online for my schedule. And it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible experience. Thankfully, I have family members that are incredible math whizzes because I use them for tutoring, but it was so impossible. And there were so many times I would just get so frustrated, and it would really affect my mental health and would make me want to throw everything away. And then when the pandemic happened, it was like, oh, you're going to have all your classes online. I was like, oh no. And especially it being like me going for my bachelor's degree, I wanted it to be in person because I wanted that networking. I wanted that get me out of the house kind of thing. It's tough for me because on one hand, I love online because my mental health can be my symptoms, especially the past few years, have been so bad lately that even with all the care I have trying to make it manageable, there are days where I can't get out of bed. I cannot. So having the class online would be helpful in that scenario because I'm able to just open my laptop in my bed and it's okay. I can still be at least present at the class for like attendance. But I'm upset that I had to put off school because now me trying to go back to school now with classes open back in person, I lost so many scholarships because I'm not an active student anymore. I am not eligible for many scholarships anymore because I'm not an active student, and even non-academic scholarships are very rare for me to get as someone that has a record, as someone that has is older in a lot of the categories that they often give non-academic scholarships, or I'm not a parent, where a lot of times I see like so many scholarships available for single parents. And I'm like, well, what about just the adult,
A young
adults
adult.
that are older trying to go back to school?
Right.
Everybody always tells me, well, just go back to school. And it's such a privileged thing to say. I think a lot of times when people say, oh, go back to school, they don't realize how privileged that statement is in itself. And like, it's so difficult. Like right now, I'm like, so what am I going to do? I can't afford to just take 1 or 2 classes, and I need to take more classes to get more financial aid. And now I got to like do it in person, which is great. But, there were so many barriers. So I'm kind of like frustrated that I did take the time off, but I guess it could be worth it because who knows, I could have like totally flunked those classes and
Right.
been kissing all that money goodbye, but still it's so frustrating.
So we had a question from a parent who wanted to know about kind of reaching kids where they are. And so Allie, I think that you touched upon that a bit in terms of understanding, where you feel and making decisions in that way. So her question is from a perspective of a parent, there are a ton of barriers with mixed learning. And she is asking about ways that we feel that we can support each other and what improvements could be made. Certainly, Allie, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that one. Scholarships, right, from a financial perspective, and understanding that there are a lot of young adults out there like yourselves who perhaps may have put off going to school for a bit. Jake, you really also touched on that socialization aspect and what that means. So it becomes a little more difficult when you are solely at home. And so maybe that hybrid method might be helpful. Michael, you're nodding your head, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm just
Part in
thinking,
person and part online.
yeah, because I think, to answer your question, Jennifer, too, I think a couple of things come to mind in how to help students. So, I mean, in regards to like a mixed learning, I think the benefit I see in that is like, if I was taking a hybrid model class and incorporating those, again, I love the virtual piece, but I think for a lot, what I've heard from like colleagues and other young adults is the in-person helps keep us on track. And I agree, accountability is huge because I had to learn that where, I had to learn like I talked earlier, I am better with like school in the morning. So I think, if in terms of moving students forward, I got to give a plug, CPAC on our students and young adult page. We have some self-care resources. So I think I always bring it back to like self-care and awareness and where are you at and who are you in the sense of what do you prefer? What are your likes? What are your interests? What are you doing for your wellness routine? So we have a lot of great resources, Jennifer, on our site, and we'll pop the link in the chat for you on that. But I think it comes back to accountability too. I had to learn like, oh, if I have an assignment due in 2 weeks and I'm like fully virtual, like the old me would have like done nothing till like the day before and just like, and maybe not done well. So I think it was a big shift where I think the one benefit we can all maybe say of in person is because you're immersed and you have to be there. There's that slow and steady. All right, we're keeping things on track. You're doing piece by piece. Whereas with virtual, it can feel easier to zone out. And I totally get that and understand that. So I think, again, bringing it back to wellness, understanding your relationship to time management, maybe, I'm not saying tutoring is always the answer, but of course, like, could there be even like peer tutoring? Like, if you don't want to pay for a tutor, could you have like some friends or some people in your neighborhood or community where you can start like just a virtual study group or just like a check-in, or maybe find someone to be like an accountability partner? Hey, like, if you're, if you know someone who's doing a similar class, can you just kind of like keep tabs now and then? Hey, how you doing? Those are just kind of like, off the top of my head, things that come to mind, and I can certainly give it more thought later on as well.
Thank you so much for adding that to check-in, because I think that's really important too, is that daily check-in, making sure that we're still all doing okay, right? So Jake, how do you think it will be going back to live classes when you're able to do that?
I think that there will be a raised level of caution that we did not have pre the pandemic. The students and teachers have to put extra thought into where they sit and how things are organized. So overall, there is more planning from that perspective. Otherwise, I believe students will be glad to get back to seeing their friends and learning in a more traditional way.
So it will feel a little more normal, right?
Exactly, yes.
So there are a number of different communication platforms that as a student, maybe now you are facing. We have Blackboard, you have text, you have email, you have chat. How do you keep it all organized?
I'm laughing, Lynn, because there's a point where I didn't. So, I think I think it goes back to, like, for me, there's this feeling of being overwhelmed, and that's part of my own like anxiety too, where it just is too much, where you have your personal email, your school emails, if you have a work email, texting, social media apps. So like a specific example is, in my recent online classes, we did have where I did miss a couple emails because in my classes, the last couple times the teachers preferred, hey, any communication, message me within Blackboard. It's easier for me. I'm like, great, fine. But then I'd find, because I'm doing that, I'm not gonna, like, my college email was the last thing on my mind. I've got homework, I've got work, I've got the rest of my life. So I would end up, like, there'd be certain emails that I'd get in my college email that I, would just miss. And if it was anything important, I'm like, well, you've gave me reasons to just like not really check it. And that may not be like an answer they want to hear from the college perspective, but I think the reality is, I needed to just like simplify things during classes. So if they're like emailing me stuff they feel like is urgent, then I don't know what to tell them, because I'd rather succeed. And like Ali shared earlier, as someone who struggled with certain subjects, especially like this past January, I was in a math class and I had failed math between 2 and 3 times. I had to do placement tests and it was a struggle. And so I'm very happy I passed, but there was that period where it felt like if they add one more thing, I'm gonna like explode. Like you're balancing a stack of plates and they're adding one little teacup thinking, oh, it's no big deal. And then like the whole thing crashes. That's how it felt. So I'm certainly a huge advocate for simplifying things.
So Emily, you had a similar situation back when you were in high school, right? With multiple communication. You are muted though.
It was
There we go.
college actually.
I'm sorry.
I had been awarded a very prestigious award in my degree program. And this was after the semester had ended. So I hadn't been checking my college email. So I had no idea. And from what I remember from the story, my advisor had called me telling me that I had won this award that I had no idea was even happening. And you know, the whole thing was like there was this whole award ceremony going on, and they had called my name with the award and with some gifts that I had been received to because of it, and I hadn't been there because I hadn't known about it, because they had given me the I guess you could say notification. They let me know via my college email, and because the semester had ended, I hadn't been checking my email, so I hadn't known about it till my advisor had called me. And so that was very interesting, having to go back to campus to accept the award and my gifts, which was very I don't want to say anticlimactic, but that's what it sort of felt like, because it was very anticlimactic because it wasn't it wasn't what it was supposed to have been, but
Right.
I'm still very appreciative of the fact, and honored, I guess, that I actually won the award.
So I think this is actually, communication is a two-way street. We all know that. There's a giver and a receiver. And so I think from a school perspective, maybe the schools need to be aware that there are so many different layers of communication and so many different methods. And it seems like no two people use the same method. I know we all have our personal preferences. Some people like to text, some people prefer a phone call, some people do email, then there's chat, then there's Remind, then there's Blackboard, then there's, so it is definitely a struggle. And I think this is something that both the student needs to be aware of, but the school also, right, should be aware of that. Emily, you wanted to add something?
Yes. What I was going to say was, what I just remembered was, yeah, I understand that I was notified via email. However, I was just under the impression that if I had won some sort of award, I would have been given a formal notification. I wasn't
Right.
expecting it to be just via regular college
Email.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that does bring up a really good point, just for everyone keeping track of all those different methods of communication. So let's change course here a little bit and move away from school a little bit and talk about socialization. So social life. Allie, what would you like to share with us about what social life has been like during this time of COVID, and as we are beginning to reopen and people are kind of going out in public? So we're going to start with you, and what you might like to.
I'm smiling and kind of giggling, I'm not taking COVID light at all. I completely believe it's real. I'm not like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm laughing and smiling because my boyfriend and I we went out everywhere possible. Like even places that weren't possible, we made possible because we would sit in the parking lot in our car with the food, like, and eating it to feel like we were at the restaurant. But we really made the best of it. But it was weird when we first because we met years ago, but we didn't start dating until about 2 years ago, which was right before the pandemic. So when we had like the shutdown, our relationship was in a stage of like getting still obviously close with each other, but getting closer. And it was like the first time one of our birthdays had come up, and like we had to, celebrate in the living room. And it was like, it was
Right, because
great.
your birthday's right after
My
COVID,
birthday
right?
is March 23rd, which was the week after the shutdown. So it was like, I remember he sent me a text and he was like, I had this dinner, it worked out for him, but I had this dinner planned, but it sounds like I'm gonna have to just take you out to your living room. Is that all right? And it worked. But what was fun was that it gave us an opportunity to get creative in our relationship. And that was the same with a lot of my friendships. A lot of I don't have many friends, and the friends I do have are like, it's such a small circle that at the time I was living with one of my best friends. So like we were built for the shutdown. We looked at each other like, our mental health is loving this right now. We get to be home and we have our cats, and her and I are able to make anything great. But we would do things like when we wanted to see other people, we would, grab a pizza and or pick up food from the spot we wanted to go to, and then go to a park or go to a beach or go to somewhere where we can all sit outside and kind of be together. And it gave an opportunity for almost more socializing, if that makes sense. Also, like family Zoom calls became a thing.
Right.
I would join those, and now it's still happening. So I think it's kind of become a little bit tradition. More group chats would happen, even though they kind of drive me nuts. But there were different ways. It was definitely really awkward. But as someone who loves finding a random excuse to get out of things because my anxiety or whatever is really keeping me back, and I don't want to just say that, I would be like, well, with COVID and all, I don't think it's a good idea to go and see this person, nothing against that person. It was just, in my moment. But I think it made it, at the time I was working as a clinician at a very busy medicated assisted therapy program. So I didn't have that work from home. I didn't know what that was like. I was, considered the frontline worker. I had to get a pass for being able to drive around. And I was stopped once and was able to be like, I have a letter. Yeah, I'm allowed to be here. And that was a fun feeling. But that made me, and the population that I served were mainly homeless, people that really had nothing in life. So watching them show up every day to get their medication or, whatever kind of treatment they were looking for made me realize, like, I'm very grateful and I'm blessed and lucky because I was, I had a home to quarantine in if that was necessary, where I was counseling people that said, okay, you want me to stay at home, where
Right.
where is that? Or there was like issues with childcare and like all kinds of stuff, and even them socially, you're like, oh, just, it's okay, you won't be able to go to your AA meeting that you need to sustain your recovery because it's now work from home and it's now virtual. You don't have a phone, you don't have a computer, you don't have this and you don't have that. The libraries are closed. You can't, like, people didn't realize how privileged many people were of being able to access the internet, access the places where they can be social online. So that was something that I was really trying to find creative ways where people can still be social in that kind of atmosphere. But it was definitely really hard. But it also, it had ups and downs in it.
Right. Now, Emily, you actually have been quite social, right?
Yeah. Um, I have I've always used the internet as a means of communicating with people. I have a lot of friends via social media, but more to Ali's point, which we just what I have actually begin talking to someone, and like um we have tried to we have like really built like a bond over the last months that we've been talking to each other. So it's really been good to actually have that time to establish a sort of relationship before we move to IRL, because it's like it'll be like 7 months in October. So I really do
Great.
think the virtual world has really opened up my world, because I've always used digital means to communicate with people. It's just, for me, like, it really opened up in terms of friends and other types of interpersonal relationships. So I really do think being in I don't know if this is gonna sound off base, and I'm sorry if it does, but being in the pandemic has really cemented that social media and like the digital world is really opening up doors for people with disabilities, like myself and others as well. I
Mhm.
do think people don't really realize the benefits of social media, because like news articles only focus on the downsides. You don't really see any
Right.
articles about, I don't know, the positives, you know?
And we had talked previously about like planning when you're going out somewhere.
Right.
You know, if transportation is an issue, Jake, we talked about this too, having someone always have to plan things with in order to maybe take you to a restaurant or take you out to a place where you're going to meet with someone. But being able to do it socially, being able to be social on in a virtual way, you don't necessarily need someone to take you there, right?
Right, exactly. And I feel that that offers a sort of independence, yes, but also a sort of pride of yourself. Like, I just did this on my own. And it makes you feel really good. Yes,
Yep, it's that feeling of independence and that
yes.
you were able to do something by yourself. I completely agree. I completely agree. And I like Emily's comment that it's almost like a test drive, that you can sort of test out that relationship online before you get in real life. So I like that idea. Michael, we have a question for you from Facebook. Laura, can you share that one with us?
Sure can. So Michael, what has helped you with your anxiety? My daughter has anxiety and wants to know what works for different people.
Sure. So this is a great question, and I want to give it the respect it deserves. So it's such a personal thing, for me. Um, for those of you who obviously, my part of my story is I'm a survivor of a brain injury. When I was 4, I've dealt with anxiety since I was an early young teenager. So for me, I always want to be upfront that what I experienced what I went through may not work, but I definitely am a huge
Mhm.
advocate. I'd like to start off with is I first love your being supportive and you're asking these questions. I think a lot of parents and professionals start off with assumptions, like assuming things about people who are going through anxiety or other challenges. So I think keeping that curious mindset and maybe having those conversations, due to the anxiety, they may not always want to talk about what's going on, but I think always having that that open, real, like that the open door policy, so to speak. So for me, again, I'm a huge advocate of um, with my anxiety, it's the holistic approach. So I had to incorporate. I've tried, medication. I'm not anti-medication personally. This is just again my own opinion, just about me. But medication certainly was helpful. I found a good routine with that. But I really felt too, along with that, it was peer support, it was therapy, it was hitting, I don't want to hit, but approaching my wellness from all different angles. It was taking a look at, was I being active? Was I eating healthy? And that those sound like really unimportant, minuscule things, but for me personally, it was when I really embraced that and not thinking, oh, like Michael's anxious, let's just like solely focus and hone in on that. And I think along with that, it's finding ways to be strength based, to be positive. I think many of us in the disability community can relate to feeling that almost all the conversations are negative, or what I can't do, or what's
Mhm.
hard. And I think you have to walk the line of acknowledging what can be difficult for someone and supporting them, but also finding what are you good at, what do you love doing. So bringing back that joy. Like for me, I loved art, I'm a huge like media guy, I love watching shows, movies, I'm a huge animal lover. So I think it's understanding that like recovery and wellness, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to look like a straight arrow. There may be periods where they may feel they're falling behind, so to speak. There may be periods feeling great, but I think it's when you have that solid foundation of respect, of love, of curiosity, when you can keep asking them, what do you need? What would you like? What would you like to try? And it's not, it's building the resilience and really understanding and learning more about yourself. And I'm a huge, actually, when I do present, I'm a huge advocate for um, I think sometimes there can be, from the parent perspective, of wanting to shield their children from everything. And like my mom was definitely more of that, and I love her, and I needed that in a lot of respects. Then my dad was more like, well, Michael, I know you can do it, so go out and try it. And I think it's that
Mhm.
opportunity and support, and it's ways to, yes, support your young adults and what they need, but also that real learning and growth can happen when they're gently pushed. And I know I could keep talking for way longer, but I hope that's helpful. And I'm certainly, yeah, so hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was very personal insight, and I am going to speak for our audience to say that we appreciate you sharing it, and all of you sharing some of your personal stories. But I was also given a question in our chat here, which was, what do you think during this whole time that we've been home, what have you found to be the most helpful for you? Now, we've talked about a few different things, we've touched upon a few different topics, but if you want to just think about it for a second, what did you find to be the most helpful for you during this time? Would anyone like to go first? Jake?
I would love that, yeah. So for myself, having a music that you can really relate to, and one that motivates you, has been very important for me, because with all my lethargy, it really provides that motivation for put my shoes on and get going with my day.
That's true. We all need to figure out what motivates us every day because it would be very easy to just go from our nighttime PJs to our daytime PJs, right?
Oh, I wish that were possible some days.
Yeah, believe me, I know when it's cold and rainy and miserable, right?
Yes.
But we have to stay motivated. And I think that that's very important because we know that, we are going to eventually get back in person. So if we are in that, in the routine of always getting up, brush your teeth, splash water on your face, right? Get yourself ready for the day. It will make it easier when we need to transition to the outside world. Perfect answer there, Jake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to add to that? Michael?
Just really quickly, yeah. I mean, for me, like what helps me stay well, and again, as I mentioned, I just love, finding ways to keep myself on track. So I've had this habit since the summer, and I try to have like a lunchtime walk where I'm blessed that I can work from home. But if I was back in the office, I still would have just said on my lunchtime, I'm gonna just go for a walk. Because for me, as someone who can be like in my head sometimes and just like overthink things, going outside for that walk, and it helps break up my day, but it just finding like, I know for my depression and anxiety, I just feel better when I'm active. So my minimum is like, I'm just going to go like 20-25 minutes in the afternoon or after work. And it can be, again, it's sometimes those simple things, but I definitely understand, like, it's the times when I don't bring it back to the basics, I don't feel as well. And that's, I'm just huge on keeping it simple, try the basics first, and then go from there.
Right. Because walking 13 feet from your bed to your office space is not really staying active,
Yeah.
right? Emily, I know you had something you wanted to add too.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add that, like, you really like, I really have to like motivate myself in order to do things like in the morning and things like that. So like, in order for me to like motivate myself when I do this for like anytime even throughout the morning is like, the way that I look at it is I basically have to reward myself the way that a parent would reward a child. It's like, if you do this, then you get to do this. Like, that's just how my brain has to, that's just how, I don't know where I like developed it along the way, but that's just how my brain has to function in order for me to force myself to do what it has to do, like.
I like that idea of rewarding yourself. I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's that's great. Do something special for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Allie, do you have anything you would like to add?
One thing I'd like to add is just, I know that it can seem really overwhelming. I'm currently in it today as of this moment, trying to like navigate going back to school, figuring out how I can do it and if I can do it. And I keep getting discouraged and I keep wanting to just like shut down and just like give up, but I'm not going to, and I'm going to keep fighting. And I encourage anybody else, keep fighting with me because we need to do this as a team. I think if more people, and as I'm going through this process, I'm going to be very vocal towards the schools and share about these struggles that I'm having and put it back on them to see if they have solutions. And I think if we all continue to do that and speak up for ourselves and voice our concerns, then these challenges and barriers may either be lifted or at least relieved. So anyone that's kind of struggling with that, I feel you, I hear you, I see you, I'm right there with you. And we're going to keep up the good fight because there's got to be a way through this. And I think the only way through it is to just go through it. So really excited for it. And I'm here to help support anyone, even if it's a venting session or whatever. I'm here for you because I so understand. So just throwing it out there that I am totally here for anybody that may need it.
Allie, I think that was very insightful and deeply personal, and again, appreciate you sharing that. Self-advocacy is something that is so critical for everyone, regardless of what age range they're in. But especially during this time, to really be able to speak up and say, hey, I need some help with this. This is what I'm struggling with right now, and I need some help with it. And I think all of you have done a great job in showing folks who are listening in terms of the importance of that. So I just want to ask if anyone has any closing comments that they would like to make. We are approaching the hour, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So just kind of go around the group and see what you would like to say to close it out. Who would like to start?
I would love to thank you, and thank you to everyone who is watching this from wherever you are. You all make our lives easier.
That's very sweet, Jake. And I think that everyone is willing to help everyone else. If we can all just lend a helping hand, the world would certainly be a better place, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, Jake. Emily, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add that, like, while this panel was like strictly like for youth and young adults in the academic world, I mean, like, I think like any youth and young adult is actually like, just been like trying to survive and balance all of the different aspects of their life, because like being a young adult is very like, it's more stressful than I thought it was going to be when I was just a teenager. So I think now that I've been in the thick of it, like in the midst of a pandemic, like I really think like it just to let youth and young adults know that they aren't alone and that people have been there before and were willing to like be like what they can be if they need it, because a lot of us didn't have us when we were younger. So
That's a very valid point, and I think it's very important. And I want to repeat that you guys didn't have you when you were younger. And I certainly applaud all of you for being brave and sharing some very personal stories. Being a young adult is definitely challenging, but like you said, Emily, when you add the pandemic to it, it puts a whole different layer of challenges to it.
Yeah.
And some of the concerns that you might have now suddenly are even more magnified.
definitely.
And while there are some positives like the socialization piece, there are also some challenging areas too. So navigating through those as a team is definitely helpful.
Absolutely.
Michael, did you want to add to any of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, so many great things this past hour, but I think closing out, I sound like a broken record bringing it back to self-care again, but like, for
It's true.
parents, professionals, schools, and system-wide, I think I've personally seen, it's kind of contagious, when you're around someone who's in like a terrible mood, it can like easily like creep around everyone. Wherever you're around someone who's like positive, it feels great. And so just kind of thinking back, I'm not underplaying how hard COVID and has been for a lot of people, but it's getting to that place of, I think, like Allie said, gratitude, like find a couple things you're grateful for and just getting out of that victim mindset if you're stuck in one, or like your problems, and taking care of yourself, because when you, as a teacher or as a parent or as a friend, as a neighbor, it's focusing on yourself. And that sounds really foreign to some people. Like, what? Like, what does that mean? But it's like the airplane analogy, the oxygen mask on yourself first. So
Mhm.
whether that means telling people in your life, all right, so I'm going to be unavailable for 3 hours on a Monday, or I can't come visit you this weekend, like finding whatever it takes to get you back to that place of I can handle it and I'm at peace. Then I think you're able to, once you hit that reset button, you're going to respond calmly and more effectively to what's going on in your life.
So find your oxygen mask
Yep.
is the mantra, right? Allie, do you have anything else you would like to add before we conclude?
No, that's it. You guys got it all.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and a deep debt of gratitude to our panelists. I think you guys did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories, and find your oxygen mask. I think that's a great way to end it, right? So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all.